Well, everyone, we're excited to open this day with the need for diversity and energy. And it's my pleasure to introduce H.G. Chissell, founder and CEO, Advanced Energy Group, who's going to be leading an excellent conversation with an amazing panel. HG, the floors are yours, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Jason. And thank you for just all the work you do and your leadership and keeping the Energy Thought Summit alive and growing. We were all, as we prepared for this, having an opportunity to reflect on the great memories and experiences that we've had as part of ETS and what Z Prime is committed to. So good morning, good afternoon. My name is H.G. Chissell. I'm founder and CEO of Advanced Energy Group, or AEG. And we focus on shifting people from being stakeholders that are often passive to be engaged, to finally being stakeholders that are mobilized towards winning at what matters most as it relates to energy, equity, and resilience. We partner with the city governments of New York, Boston, Cambridge, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. And annually, we work with about a half a dozen island countries in the Caribbean, all focused on how do we mobilize as committed stakeholders on these critical issues to collaborate, challenge the status quo, and get things done. And so personally, this issue of equity is at the core to our commitment to these issues, because I think at the end, it's about appreciating our common shared humanity and why it matters. Injustice anywhere is just as bad as, justice everywhere. I'm thinking of the comment by Martin Luther King about if we truly appreciate our shared humanity, then we have to truly be into this together. And the issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion are critical to move us towards that end state. And so today we get an opportunity to get in this discussion with three fantastic leaders who have very important perspectives to bring to this discussion from their experiences. And I'm excited to open up the floor to them. I've asked them each to provide an introduction of themselves and share what is it that they are most excited to talk about regarding this topic. So that'll get us started. And I'd like to introduce Suzanne Russo, CEO of Pecan Street, to kick us off. Welcome.
Hi, thanks HG so much for having me. I'm really excited about this discussion and the panel today. So as HG said, my name is Suzanne Russo. I run a nonprofit that's based in Austin, but we do work around the country that works to develop community-based data and technology solutions for climate change. I'm so excited to talk about the power of engaging with communities today in this panel.
Nice, thank you. Critical point. And Sadzi Oliva, former Illinois Commerce Commissioner, someone I've had the real pleasure and opportunity to work with and see her leadership and community impact firsthand. Welcome. I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and your new role and your experience related to this topic.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, HG, for moderating this panel. Thank you to Jason, Ricky, and Barrett for putting all of this together. I'm so excited to be part of ETS21. So I have a new role now. I am at United Scrap Metal. I'm their VP of Government Relations and Community. In this role, I direct federal, state, and local government and community relations across the United Scrap Metal locations within the United States. I also focus on extending our mission to make a positive impact in the lives of others by working with other business and government units on community outreach through numerous charitable and philanthropic endeavors. I'm so excited to be at United Scrap Metal. We are a woman-owned business with an incredible story that I hope to share as we continue talking. And I'm also the first Latina to serve as an executive team member at United Scrap Metal. So a lot that I can contribute to this conversation in my former role as a regulator and in my current role. Thank you.
Fantastic, Sadzi. Great to have you. And then Gerardo Delgado. Great to have you with us as well.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, please introduce yourself for the group and we'll get into our discussion.
Great. Well, first I'd like to thank as well Jason Rodriguez, Ricky Murray, the entire Z Prime family for the opportunity to be part of this fantastic panel on an important critical topic. in our industry. As mentioned, I'm Gerardo Delgado, an energy and water regulation attorney at Quarles and Brady. Quarles and Brady is a multidisciplinary AM Law 200 firm with 10 offices and approximately 475 attorneys practicing throughout the country and also internationally. My practice consists of representing and advising investor-owned utilities and other energy-related companies on capital projects and other regulatory compliance and needs. Prior to joining Quarles, I had the honor of serving as legal and policy advisor for my co-panelists today, Sadzi Oliva. During our tenure at the commission, as you'll get to hear, we dealt with DEI on various fronts through docketed proceedings, stakeholder engagement and outreach, and implementing a milestone legislation in the state of Illinois, the Future Energy Jobs Act. Currently, I'm working on an impactful community project at Quarles, which will potentially interconnect a renewable energy resource as part of a large project happening in the state of Illinois, which will bring great benefits to a underprivileged and depressed neighborhood through economic, environmental, and health benefits. So this topic certainly is always at the forefront of my career, and certainly given the circumstances of today, I'm looking forward to the discussion that will not only highlight the awareness for DEI and the needed efforts and missed opportunity, as well as opportunities for growth, but also highlight the efforts that are being made to facilitate change as it's happening. So thank you again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to clarify and do justice to Dr. King. What he said was that is powerful, I think, is injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that's a powerful statement. And I think it relates well to what we want to discuss today, because it relates also to action. And where do we need to act regarding this concept or topic of diversity and energy, and why is it important? I'm thinking, Suzanne, maybe you could set the framework for this from the community lens that you operate on why there's a critical need, why it's important, and where do we need to start first?
I will try. Big statement. But I believe in the power of communities, and it's the reason Pecan Street tries to approach the acceleration of innovation for climate solutions from a community-based perspective, because the people that you serve are going to tell you everything you need to know about how to be successful. If you engage with them, you bring them into the tent and make serving them and working with them and having communities lead your work part of your mission and your operations. So we were having a little conversation before we kicked off live today. HG said somebody had proposed a question to him recently about what's more important, diversity, inclusion, or equity. And then he also threw in justice. And as a group, we talked about how that's kind of a false choice. We know now that you can't have equitable outcomes without diversity and inclusion on your team. You can't understand what justice means without diversity and inclusion on your team. And you're probably not going to have a diverse and inclusive team if justice and equity aren't a part of your objectives as a company. And this is all particularly important because we're talking about the energy sector, which is one of the pillars of the American economy, both in and of itself with the jobs that we have here, the GDP contributions, but also because energy powers literally everything else. So figuring out how to have an energy economy that achieves our federal clean energy objectives while also achieving better community services and more equity and more economic and wealth opportunities for everybody in the country is such a wonderful opportunity that we all have right now. And also such a big challenge, because I think energy is one of the last big sectors to really figure out, how do we do this? What does that look like? How do we chart a path towards those goals? And how do we do it in a way that continues to be profitable? Because the economic growth within energy is so important to our nation's overall prosperity. But again, I think that all starts with just engaging with your community, getting out into the community. If you work at an electric utility or you work at an energy company, understanding who you're serving, what are their challenges, what do they love, what do they not like, what are they going to engage with, what are they not going to engage with. But also just starting with some basic information like understanding the ethnic and minority breakdown of your community, and having that as, I think, a minimum guidepost for what your diversity and inclusion should be for your company. Do you racially represent the people that you serve? If you don't, why not? At Pecan Street, and I think a lot of tech and energy companies have faced this challenge with hiring, and I won't get into this too much because I know some other people are going to talk about this, but that problem starts early. It starts with leadership, but it also starts early. We have a real crisis of education in our country. Only 4% of the engineering bachelor's degrees that are given out pretty much year over year for the past several years, only 4% of those go to Black students. So if you're looking to diversify an energy company, a lot of your jobs are going to be around engineering, power systems engineering, civil engineering, mechanical, particularly as we move into more of a digital energy space. Those technical skills and those hard data and engineering skills are going to be where we have a lot of growth with jobs. So we need to get better educational opportunities developed. And again, a lot of that starts with your community, as a company engaging in your community to make sure those educational opportunities are present. So you're going to have a good resource to draw from for jobs and hiring. I'll stop there because I know everybody else has a lot of insight and great information and ideas to share. I'm happy to jump back into what a community engagement structure might look like at some point as well. But I'll end with, we know from our work at Pecan Street that engaging directly with communities and developing solutions accelerates that cycle and makes it more profitable for all of the companies and parties that are involved in developing and scaling solutions.
Thank you, Suzanne. I think it's an important base to have this discussion on, because in many ways it's getting to the greatest number of people affected by issues like this. And then the connection between the base of the pyramid and then also at the top, which is something, Sadzi, we had talked about, as the importance of having a two-pronged approach to driving true change, systemic change in an organization, needs to have the community outreach, the learning, the talent development, and it needs to have strong leadership at the top that gets these issues in an authentic way that people can believe that they really care about. Can you talk about that perspective a little, please?
Yes, absolutely. So what we talked about earlier was leadership that prioritizes these basic needs in this world that we live in now, with so many changes and so many things being thrown at us. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are we providing to the communities that we're headquartered in, that we serve? Exactly what Suzanne said. And I think having both perspectives now, as a regulator and as a leader at a partner to utilities. So what I didn't explain earlier is that United Scrap Metal provides metal recycling services to a lot of sectors in the United States, including utilities, manufacturing, construction. So, I ended up at the absolute perfect place for me with my passions after I served on the Illinois Commerce Commission. And I think what's important to know is that leaders need to have reliable partners that align with their values and ESG goals. And that is in sustainability, leadership, governance, workforce, environmental impacts, and their clean energy future goals. So when they're looking to partner up with other companies that they need in order to reach their own goals as utilities, they need to think about those things. Are the people that they're partnering up with bringing that to their organizations? Do they have a big positive footprint in the communities that they're in? These are all important things. It isn't just having a business and being a profitable business. What are you doing to give back? And that's why I'm so happy and so fortunate to have ended up at United Scrap Metal after my term as a commissioner, because that's exactly what they represent. We were founded in 1978 by a woman. She had $200 to her name and a rental truck. And now she is one of the United Scrap Metal, her company is one of the largest full service recyclers in the country. The company, since its founding, has prioritized its core values of philanthropy, sustainability, diversity, and carrying out its mission of making a positive impact in the lives of others. And that means our community, our employees. We've pioneered innovative solutions that drive recycling programs through an ethical and sustainable practice. And this shows in the awards that we've received and the recognition that we have throughout the country. So I think in this clean energy future, it's very important that leaders on the utility side, on the government side, as well as in the supply chain, all of these priorities and values align. Otherwise, this won't happen.
So you need that ecosystem that's aligned to these priorities to make impact. And I like your point on the utilities. I think that's going to be an interesting intersection for our dialogue here. And so that kind of pulls you in, Gerardo, of the work you do with utilities. How well are they doing in terms of following through on their vision for equity and diversity and inclusion from your perspective? And where do you see the big opportunities for next steps and growth and achieving these important ideals?
Definitely. So, with my role at the commission, there's a focus obviously in Illinois utilities, but through our work, had the breadth and see what was happening across the country. And similarly now working as a lawyer and also being able to interact with other entities throughout the country and utilities, but not just utilities, but also other stakeholders and businesses, there is a need and there is a dedication to the development of workforce, right? I think Susan mentioned that it's not merely just also valuing the need, but also the way in which we go about it and having a plan. I mean, you heard from Sadzi and her company is very much dedicated to it. In fact, their fabric is based on diversity, equity, and inclusion and the need for it in this industry. So I think utilities and other stakeholders have been very kind of methodical and deliberate in developing that through apprenticeship programs in their construction projects and other ancillary services that goes into capital investment projects. Illinois has been very successful in kind of growing that. I mean, you have utilities spending over or approximately $2 billion on diverse suppliers, right? And there's also a dedication to kind of growing human capital within these institutions, right? And I think there's lies for more opportunity there. We need to, certainly we need to focus on that early intervention with, children in STEM programs at a very early age. And we know how impressionable that is, but also in that time period, we need to kind of harness the professionals we have in this industry and let them grow and develop their leadership and to obtain these positions of decision making and for lack of other words, power, right? So I guess I'll speak from, and as I always share in this forum, these are my opinions and perspectives and not anyone else's, but for more of a personal note, I am the beneficiary of that mentorship and sponsorship and growth. I mean, it's through Sadzi and other wonderful leaders in this industry who were helping and guided me, provided me the education and training that has led to where the professional I am today in this industry, and then the opportunities I will be given in the future. So as far as where lies the next opportunity, next steps, perhaps we develop together in a much more perhaps organized fashion nationally, a framework that will develop that. I mean, the conversation has been started at NARUC through many different facets. Commissioner Oliva definitely pioneered a resolution that partnered with college institutions to grow these professionals at even the collegial level and going forward. So I think everyone's dedicated to it. They have their systems, but maybe a more unified system is the next step.
Interesting. And please, if you have comments or questions that you have for us, we can get these questions and comments, and we'd love to bring those into our discussion. I'm going to throw out some problems that I've seen on these issues, obstacles. That's what we do in our stakeholder challenges is speakers come to present not a solution, but a critical obstacle that requires collaboration to overcome. And it's related to topics like critical infrastructure, buildings, grid modernization, mobility, and transportation. And it all has to relate to equity in that obstacle. And so here's some things that have come out from these discussions across these 4 cities. Number one, the digital divide. The digital divide is perpetuating inequities that are getting wider and wider, especially during this time when we rely more on technology. Those who don't have it get left further and further behind. So that's one I see that's massive. The other is the labor shortage. We're in a tremendous labor shortage on the eve of a massive commitment to a systemic change across our entire energy power infrastructure. So if we're not investing in those who can be trained to take this challenge of a labor shortage and turn it into an opportunity, then that's another major problem, because I see wealth inequity as such a fundamental pillar if we're going to get on the same plane as humans that we address. And so that was the other one that I've seen come out, is this labor shortage and making sure that the future that we're seeing with all these great investments is actually an opportunity for those who have been really exploited in the process of getting where we are to bring into this. That's the other one. And then finally, I think, how do we help those business owners, those suppliers, with a better process to be available and selected for green energy jobs? And what is the role of the utility to provide greater access, or the regulator? So those are some problems, obstacles I'm throwing on the table here. And I want to see maybe who wants to pick up one or two and take it on.
I'd love
Suzanne.
to jump on the digital divide one. All of these are wonderful, but I think bringing up the digital divide that's a huge barrier that you have heard with your community-based work being brought up, I'm sure, again and again and again, because it impacts pretty much every facet of life right now, right? Remote school, remote work, also being able to engage in new digital economies, which electric utilities and energy is surely pivoting that way as well. That's a great example of why we need to have more community engagement in developing policies and solutions. We've got a lot of federal funding that's going to be coming out that is focused on infrastructure, and it has at its heart the goal of achieving greater equity within our country. Putting a lot of that money towards closing that digital divide, towards bringing broadband into the communities that don't have it, both urban and rural, and making internet affordable for everybody should be the priority, I think, based on what you're hearing from communities and what we've heard and what we've experienced, even just in the ability to do research with communities. Not having internet means households have not been able to participate in any of the country's research projects. We've worked with the Verizon Foundation to provide internet for free to some households so that we can start collecting data and closing that data gap on energy equity. But this is an issue that pervades every aspect of life, and I don't think there's going to be a way to solve it without policy and probably federal intervention, but we have a moment to do that. And if we listen to communities, we can.
Thank you. Yeah, there's Chicago for Kids First in Chicago has a great, exciting partnership with the city of Chicago and some great philanthropic organizations to tackle this. It's not like we don't have the means and ability to provide access, right? It's, do we have the will to make it happen, and the understanding of how important it is to society to do it?
Yeah, yes. Sorry, just to add on, I think it's important to address these kinds of systemic issues, the digital divide being an example of one, from a federal approach versus a local one, because being in cities, most cities, you've got more resources, more foundations, more wealth has been generated in cities, and wealthy individuals live there and they want to give back. Even state by state, you have different levels of prosperity and ability for states or utilities to provide resources to households. If we try to solve these kinds of problems, I think within individual communities, we're going to continue to end up in a really patchwork situation where we still have divides and we still have inequities, particularly with the digital divide between rural and urban communities. More people that live in rural areas actually don't have access to internet than people who live in cities. And you have far fewer foundations focusing on rural communities than on cities. So I do just want to put in a plug for, I think it is important to have conversations that bridge between what we're seeing with communities and how to solve those at different levels of resources in government.
Thank you.
Sorry, Gerardo.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I think that there's an opportunity for funding, right? Because we're also faced with, especially municipalities and cities, where they don't have a limitless budget, right? And then also institutions that don't have limitless, I guess, a capital funding. So I guess my point would be is to open the table to a sphere of investment to maybe the non-traditional players, right? Because especially at the utility level, right? And when you're dealing with infrastructure of, 5G and just the advances that are happening in clean energy, I think most players just look to the utility as the source of potential funding, right? I mean, I'll in this discussion that we had about in July with HG's organization, an energy developer said, the amount of funding that needs to happen in order to get to where we want to go and the development that needs to happen in this country to meet these environmental goals far exceeds what the capital investments are happening in the local utilities rate case, right? It's a significant amount of money, but it's not enough to get to where we need to be. So I think we need to start looking outside the traditional players and the sphere of investment to understand who are the other players that can contribute to this overall goal. Certainly, Susan may have mentioned, the opportunities that Verizon has offered, and again, it's hard to coordinate when you have so many different, certainly intricacies. But I think we have to be a little bit more deliberate and kind of making these decisions and moving forward. And I think too, there's an opportunity. We need to continue and kind of expand the incentives and the funding that is happening at the national and federal level to avail these opportunities, because again, I believe our local communities are very strapped to really kind of make these investments that are so costly. And again, there's a certain review that happens also at the regulatory level that are necessarily not being received the same way as which industry is looking to move forward.
Sadzi, I'm curious, if you would share with the audience the work you did on supplier diversity, and then thinking now about this new administration and the possible opportunities and alignment, and as Suzanne mentioned, having equity at its heart, what opportunities do you see this opening or creating that we really need to jump on to support those minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses right now that really need to be at the forefront of receiving support for this revolution that we're in, clean energy revolution?
Sure. Well, I saw as my term at the Illinois Commerce Commission that one of the biggest challenges for small minority and women-owned businesses to enter these partnerships with utilities is the barrier of certification. The process of certification is very important. You don't want businesses to conduct themselves fraudulently. So I understand the purpose behind certification, and it's incredibly important. But is there a way to reduce the barriers that are required for certification? It's costly, it's cumbersome. A lot of financial documents are necessary. Inspections are necessary. And then sometimes you're required to have certification at the local level, the city level, the county level, the state level, the federal level. Is that really necessary? So as a result of hearing that complaint from women-owned businesses, and these were sophisticated ladies in the banking industry, in the legal industry, and they were talking about how hard it was to initially certify, how expensive it is. So not everybody has the means to do that. So it's a barrier. So we issued a resolution at NARUC, our National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, asking utilities to take a look at that certification process. Is there a way to reduce the duplicity of it? Here in Illinois, there was recent legislation passed talking about just that. Let's see how we can reduce those barriers for women and minority-owned business through the certification process. And I think that's the right step. Partnering up with diverse owned businesses, not just on the labor side, but also on the professional services side. So a lot of the utility work traditionally goes to your bigger law firms in every city. Is there a way to partner up with minority owned law firms, women owned law firms? Or if not, can we give credit to those big law firms that are giving the work and giving the experience to minority associates? So how can we keep better track of this, and how can we make for more opportunities for experience and chances? Another resolution that we issued at NARUC was partnering up with historically Black universities with minority serving institutions. So looking at all of the colleges that have a majority of minority students, can you partner up with them for recruitment of your entry level and professional level job openings, with organizations such as SHIP, the Society of Hispanic Engineers? Those are the things that we were hoping to have collaboration on, and I think we made great strides, but we still have a lot of work to do. I think in our industries, we can't let go of the vision. At United Scrap Metal, I'm going to give you a quote from our founder, Marcia Serlin. She said, "Investing in best practices and in our people is part of our formula. We create great opportunities for a diverse workforce where people are inspired by the opportunity to show what they can do." And that rings so true at United Scrap Metal. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard about a career voyage where an employee came in entry level and they were a success. So a career voyage to leadership, I've seen it in operations, I've seen it in customer excellence, in sales. So given an opportunity and doing your best and investing in your workforce, I think is so important as well. So you have to have the drive within the organization and also the policies in place on a bigger scale, with the states that you're functioning in and with the regulators that you have to report to. So again, I think all of these things are necessary in order to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve in this discussion, which is the need for diversity in energy.
Thank you. I felt like you were speaking directly to my heart when you talked about certification. I am a minority business enterprise, and what I need to go through to be registered in New York and then Washington, D.C., and then at the federal level. By the time I get through all of that, I'm like, when is it time for me to go and make sure people know I can help them after I get through doing all the certification? So and at some point, someone needs to know I'm Black somewhere. Why is this so difficult to make, I get it. It's, I definitely relate to that being a challenge when you're running a business and trying to grow something, which I thought of something, Suzanne, you said in our preparation about the power and importance of data to be matched with good intention. Because I'm optimistic to say, I feel that our intentions and awareness to move in a better direction than before is growing. I was heartened by the response I saw after the murder of George Floyd, the commitment to Black Lives Matter as human beings, and how that showed up in the energy space and people making announcements on LinkedIn, et cetera. But ultimately, it's going to be about awareness and understanding, which comes to data, which we have a better access to than ever before. But are we capturing the right data so we better understand the things we need to address than before? And you had talked about a little bit of your work with that, Suzanne. I wonder if you could speak to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because we do need to have some transparency and some ability to have insight into how well are we achieving these objectives as an industry at all points of interface. And we don't have the data to be able to understand what works, what doesn't, how good of a job are we doing at achieving our objectives around diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice. And there is a big question. There's a longstanding question about data access and data privacy within the electric utility sector. And I think the electric utility sector is the best poised to actually lead our country in solving a lot of the consumer data privacy challenges that we've been struggling with for the past decade now. So erring on the side of consumer privacy is great, and that's a good place to start. But we do need, particularly for utilities, to collect information about the racial and income demographics of their constituents, of the people that they serve, and to report out how they're doing with program adoption, with resource allocation, with outreach and marketing to their communities, broken down by those racial and income demographics. And it's only when we start to have that information that we can really get serious and really start to accelerate developing and deploying and scaling solutions that work, solutions that really result in equity and restorative justice.
Thank you. Yeah. I think about this discussion and I think about redlining, right? All this data had been collected for years on this practice of selectively giving mortgages to people who were not Black or of color. And now all of a sudden we have such great data capabilities that we didn't have before to really demonstrate the pernicious, outcomes and impacts of all of that in ways we couldn't before, that has led to some really inspiring legislation and action because of that. And hopefully we can continue to pull out the data that just puts a stark contrast to what we want for our society and where we truly are and who needs help so that we can get there together. I'm hopeful for that. I did want to spend our last couple minutes, be given the abstract, to talk about what are some things you've learned just putting your activist hat on for a moment, right? In terms of sparking greater diversity in the workplace, that you might be able to inspire those watching to support them in that goal if they have that goal. Anybody want to take that? And Ricky just gave us a great question. If organizations want more diversity within their team, what's one way they could get started on that today? So whether it's diversity on your team or diversity in the workplace, give us a catalyst for as we move to closing remarks here for our audience.
Well, I'll
Gerardo.
begin by stating, certainly identifying those professionals that are in the industry and continue to invest in them and, in their professional development. This is a very nuanced industry, although it cannot be learned, but certainly familiarity is beneficial. So there are professionals out there who have decided and determined to grow their careers. So identify them and then develop them and, start building programs in which will kind of avail that through recruiting and just fostering the capital talent that's in your institution.
Thank you. Let me go to Sadzi. What would be a catalyst, Sadzi, you could share?
Well, I think what Gerardo said is spot on. Investing in the talent that you're already familiar with and that is going to have positive contributions in your organization, giving these individuals an opportunity to be mentored, to be sponsored. And then when you look outside of your organization, I think it's very important to partner up with positive, supportive associations. For example, in the case of United Scrap Metal, the support of organizations such as Women in Manufacturing. So there are similar organizations throughout the utility industry, such as Hispanics in Energy, the Association of African Americans in Energy. So these are the types of organizations that you should be partnering up with, working with in order to meet your diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. I don't think there's a shortage of people and groups that you can work with to achieve these goals. You just have to do it.
Yeah, and they will welcome your support and engagement, and they're so deserving of it. Suzanne.
And I will mention also one more thing is that it behooves these organizations too, given what's happening across the country on clean energy, that specifically ask for the development of workforce to reach out to the utilities, to reach out to these providers, because they are also looking for that outreach as well.
Thank you. Suzanne.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get through two real quick. One, I think is leadership, is looking at your board, your senior management team, looking at, are you actually capturing that value of diversity within that group? One of the things we've heard at Pecan Street, as we've tried to diversify our team, is that when individuals look at our jobs, they'll come and they'll look at our team and they'll see, is there anybody that works there that looks like me? Is this a place that I'm going to feel comfortable? Is this going to be a culture where I feel like I'm going to fit in and I'm going to have support and I'm going to have those opportunities for growth? And if you're not representing that in the team that is the face of your company, you're going to have a hard time attracting diverse talent. But the second thing is making sure that you're also investing in creating those job opportunities within your communities. I talked about at the beginning that only 4% of engineering bachelor's degrees have been given to African-American students annually for a while now. 30% of those students got their degrees at HBCUs, which predominantly exist in the Southeast United States. How can we create more opportunities for quality education for students, no matter where they live? But also, how can we do better just workforce training? Tesla recently partnered with Austin Community College. They're offering a really great 14-week automated skills training program so that they're able to hire workers for their new gigafactory here in Austin from within the community. I think utilities can do a lot more in that space, whether it's helping to develop and subsidize that kind of technical training within the community, or doing more job fairs so that it is easier for people to understand what jobs are open, how can I apply, particularly if I don't have internet in my house, who can I talk to, how can I make a face-to-face connection with somebody at this company? Those are all really little lifts that I think anybody could get out and change right now.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everybody who participated and stayed involved. And my last thoughts on this would be, leaders lead people, extraordinary leaders lead conversations. And as extraordinary leaders, we can take on the leadership challenge of having an inclusive conversation, bring in those leaders, make the effort to get them into a conversation who often are not asked. We can take that on. There's nothing more gratifying to me when I look at my speaker rosters to see such a beauty of diversity and perspective. It's like, that's what I'm proud of that I do with the work I am committed to. And I think that's, as leaders, we can enrich our conversations every day as leaders. So I want to thank all of you. Thank you so much, Suzanne, Gerardo, and Sadzi, for joining us for this discussion. I hope it continues, Jason. It's important, and we've only just begun.
Thank you so much.